Okay, now we are going to talk about B2B marketing. We've talked about it a little bit in some of the previous lectures. This one will be short. We don't do a lot of focus on this particular course on B2B marketing, but I did want to make sure that we touch on it. So we are going to move forward and discuss it. So let's talk about it. Consumers use a lot of different places, and how do they get transferred and assembled and move forward? Well, they require a lot of inputs and materials and packaging, parts and different things. Organizations are really forced to turn to other types of suppliers and vendors in order to make things work. I mean, I can't produce my watch without a lot of parts and pieces. And where do I get that from? So there's a lot of B2B work that is done. And some companies that you will have never heard of that are some of the most successful in the world that really never reach a consumer directly. So organizations can be producers, manufacturers, processors, assemblers, and service providers. I mean, they have a number of different roles that they can provide. What is B2B marketing? Well, this is the reselling or manufacturing or servicing, assembly, right? We see this a lot. The decisions are taken usually by a group of people. It's rational because it's done by this group of people. It's not their money, and it's time consuming, but it's never impulsive. Businesses will not do that. So that's something that we have to consider when we are marketing into another business. B2B marketing, the purchase decisions are formal. There's usually quotes, negotiations, payment terms, delivery. This repeat purchase follows a systematic pattern. That's the nice thing about B2B purchases, is that they tend to not be one-off. They tend to be repetitive in nature if it is done correctly. Sometimes they're one-off, but a lot of times they are very repetitive and frequent in nature. All right, the classification of B2B products. Well, there's these kind of raw materials. There's manufactured parts, things that are already completed. There's installation. This is a service. Not everything is a product. Some of them are services, accessories. There are goods not entering the supplies as well. So there's a number of different types of things that we can classify in B2B products. There's these services again, maintenance, before and after the sale, professional services, right? One of the things that even NSU does is it provides professional services to companies. We will go in and teach courses that are specifically geared toward their employees and what their needs are. That would be very B2B professional type of service, accounting services and things like that. All right, what are the factors that influence B2B decisions? Well, they buy for a number of different reasons, right? Operations, business objectives, and policies. There's a number of different organizational factors in play, interpersonal factors as well, and individual. What do individuals need? What does the organization need? What are the factors that affect all of that? So there's a number of different ways, and B2B purchasing can be fairly complicated, but there are 4 B2B markets for you to consider. Producers and industrial products markets, resellers. These are semi-finished products. They're not totally finished, or they're being passed through. Government markets, the government spending account, that's the GSA. All of their purchases must be quoted and made through the GSA. And of course, the service market as well. And these are oftentimes professional services. The decision-making units, the DMUs within a larger organization, users, there's influencers, people who may not be using it, who may be influencing it. For example, your IT guy, he may not be using the computer that you actually have, but he's influencing what's going to get purchased. The actual buyers, there may be a buyer that this IT person is influencing to make the purchase. Deciders, maybe it's not the IT guy that's influencing or the buyer, but maybe ultimately there's someone that needs to make a budget decision. They're saying, yes, go ahead and do that. Maybe that's someone else. And then there's gatekeepers, right? There's people who yes, it can go through. No, it doesn't. Maybe it has to get a final approval or something like that. Okay, the reseller or the trading market. There a lot of times with resellers, there is a broad assortment of different things. There's a scrambled assortment of different things. Reseller market is kind of interesting. I once worked for a copy and fax manufacturer, and we were a reseller in a sense. You would not have recognized the company I worked for, but you would absolutely recognize all of the different labels that I had in my desk drawer. Kyocera Mita, Ricoh, Samsung, all of those sort of things that, let's see, Brother, all of those sort of brands would have been in my desk drawer. Same exact printer, but it was just had a different label that was attached to it. Most companies do this. For example, Sony manufactures televisions for a lot of different lesser known brands. Why do we pay more for Sony? Well, we pay more for their advertising. We pay more for their brand name. To disappoint some of you, food manufacturers do this all the time. You know, Del Monte cans up things, and at the end, the label being wrapped around is Del Monte, and you pay in a bit more because of the brand. But they're also making it for other places like Walmart and Target and their store brands and other brands as well. These lines don't just stop just for Del Monte, but they make it for a lot. And that's how they get that efficiency, that economy of scale in this kind of B2B reseller market. These are major purchase decisions. They can be straight buy, modified buy, or new task. These are things you don't really need to kind of worry and memorize, but they just want to make you aware of what they are. What are the steps in B2B? Well, we have a need recognition. We know that. We did that with the consumer. And then we'll go through a need definition. Okay, well, let's define what it is. Let's make sure that we're all on the same page about what the need is. And that's a part of that purchase. And that gives that a little bit more complexity, a need description then. Seller identification, proposal. We want people to come out. You know, we're not necessarily looking for information and soliciting alternatives. We're allowing them to come to us. Then we go through that proposal evaluation and selection, right? Then we do the ordering procedure, and then the acceptance of the order by the seller. So it's a more complicated process than we might find even with a high involvement purchase by a consumer like you or I. Here's a kind of, I think, a very interesting way of looking at B2B versus B2C. B2B, it sells goods or services to one another. B2C, but goods or services are sold to the end consumer. What are the features? B2B, it's high sales volume and high risk, right? Oftentimes very expensive. B2C, low sales volume, fairly low risk most of the time. It's an individual situation. Branding, B2B marketing, it's focused on leads. We want to make sure that rather than, making sure that people have a recognition of our brand, B2C is focused on creating that brand. I want to make sure that you can identify iPhone or Apple or Diet Dr. Pepper or whatever. So we think about that in B2C marketing. Relationships, B2B, it is a long-term relationship. You will see that. B2C, it's transactional. We want that frequency of purchase, right? Here's another way of looking at it. B2B is very small. I may not have a lot of people I can sell my products to, but they're going to buy a lot of it. So there's a lot fewer companies than there are actual individual people. B2C, large market size. B2B, oftentimes there's a committee, a lot of people involved in these decisions, whereas B2C, very individualized. B2B, complex transaction systems. They're not just handing you a credit card and making $1 million purchase. It's very complicated, payment terms and contracts and the things that they will do in the negotiation. B2C, very instant. I swipe my card, I get my Diet Dr. Pepper, I walk out. That's how that works. B2B, demand is based on their needs. And a lot of times with B2C, we're a consumptive society, our demand is based on a wish. I want it. B2B, the use of mass media is very optional. You don't see it very often. It's expensive and it doesn't necessarily drive sales. Whereas B2C, the use of mass media is essential to get the name out there. I can't go a night without seeing a commercial for a soda of some kind. So that is the differences in all of these. Quick lecture on B2B, but I at least wanted to give you a cursory overview of what it was so that you had that information. I will see you in the next lecture.